Hi everybody, my name is Eloise Williams and I am an author and also the Children's Laureate Wales, and I'm really grateful to be part of your festival. I hope you're having a fantastic time and reading lots of books and talking about lots of stories. So a little bit about me. I live in Wales. I'm currently on holiday in a little holiday cottage, which is a bit like my own house because I write in the attic in my own house, and I'm in a little attic room filming this now. And I've written 4 books. Ellen's Island was my first book. My second book was Gaslight. I've got a copy of that just here. There it is. Gaslight, and Sea Glass was my third book. That's a scary ghost story because I love ghost stories. And my latest book is called Wild, and that's about witches. So I've got some questions from you here. I thought I'd have a go at answering those as best I can. So here we go. How do you find inspiration to write a book? And that's from Eve. Thank you, Eve, for your question. I mostly get my inspiration from keeping my eyes wide open and listening really carefully to things. So I go for walks and I look all around me and see if I can see anything interesting. The landscape, the places around me really inspire me. I like to watch lots of films. I like to listen to people's conversations. I don't tell them I'm listening sometimes, and I write tiny bits down. And I always change those conversations a little bit, but it's just to give me ideas. I read lots and lots of books. That gives me ideas as well. I travel the world through books and travel different worlds through books as well, I suppose. So yeah, I get my inspiration from all over the place, really. A lot of the time I get my inspiration from working with young people as well, because I find that they're very inspiring and imaginative, and while I don't steal their ideas, it does help me to have ideas of my own to talk to young people, and their enthusiasm is kind of infectious, so that really helps me with my own writing. For example, Wild, my latest book, is about somebody who is challenged by bullies and is starting a new school, and these are all kind of things that I thought about while I was working with young people in schools and seeing how brave and powerful young people can be. And that's what started that book. So all over the place, the more you get out there, the more things you do, the more you read, the more you listen, the more films you watch, the more places you go, the more ideas you will get. Good question. Does a book take you a long time to write? Ruby M. It takes different amounts of time, Ruby. For me, the most lengthy part of writing a book is actually the thinking about it. I spend a long time thinking about it. So by the time I come to actually write that book, I very often have a good idea of what my characters are. I have the world of my story already inside my head, so I know what kind of place it's set in. I know what the characters like, what they don't like. I know what's going to happen at the beginning of the story. Very often I know what's going to happen at the end as well. So I've created this whole world in my head by the time I come to write it down. So in total, it can take different amounts of time. But my latest book, I thought about it for probably a few months before I even started to write. And then it took me probably another few months to write it all down. What was your favourite book to write and why? That's from Lexi. Oh, that's a hard question, Lexi. My favourite book, I think, was Gaslight, I think, because I had to do a lot of research into Victorian times. I love Victorian stories, so stories like Dracula and Frankenstein and A Christmas Carol, and there were a lot of ghost stories in Victorian times too, which I love, as I said before. So yes, I really liked writing Gaslight because it was interesting to find out all those things and try. I guess I was challenging myself to create a believable world that was based in historical times. So that was, yeah, it was fun to write, and it was really interesting to look into all those different Victorian theatres and poisons and what happened to people if they didn't do as they were told in Victorian times, and how did children survive, and yeah, it was just fascinating. So yeah, I think Gaslight. We know Sea Glass is set on a Welsh coastline, so does Wales inspire a lot of your writing? And that's from Fionn. Yes, it does. I'm hugely inspired by Wales and Welsh people and the people who live in Wales as well. They might not necessarily be people who are Welsh by birth, but the people that I meet when I'm walking around and going to different places, I love to write about those, or I love to be inspired by those people's stories, whether that be of courage or humour or whatever it is. I get a lot of my ideas when I'm walking along the Wales coast path because I live in Pembrokeshire and it's very, very beautiful. I get a lot of ideas just from walking anywhere in Wales really. So Cardiff inspired Gaslight, walking around Cardiff and being in the theatres in Cardiff. Sea Glass is inspired by where I live now. I live quite close to the sea and it's very foggy in the winter, and that inspired me. Actually walking through a caravan park inspired me for Sea Glass. So yeah, hugely inspired by Wales. I also think we have great history and great culture and great traditions, can't say the word, but traditions, which really inform and make my writing really, really interesting for me. I think I love to write about Wales, so yes. Do you base your characters on real people? I think that's Kezia or Kezia. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that. I sometimes use aspects of real people, so little bits and pieces of real people, but never a whole real person. I think a lot of characters are based on experiences I've had or people I've met, or lots of them are based on me in little ways as well. So even the evil characters are things that they have tiny bits of me in them because I guess I've imagined those evil things that they're doing. That's a dreadful thing to admit, isn't it? So yes, they are inspired by real people sometimes, but they're not real people. They're just based on my experiences. That's a kind of a strange answer, but I hope that makes sense. How do you go about setting your books during different times? Like Gaslight is set in Cardiff, 1899. That's from Heidi. Well, I'd worked in a lot of theatres before I started writing. So I was an actor for 10 years before I started writing any stories at all. And I'd been to a lot of different theatres, so I knew what Victorian theatres were like. So that's where I started, with things that I knew already. Then I used this amazing invention called the internet, and I looked up loads of different things about Victorians. The danger is, when you're doing something historical, you think you have to know everything about the Victorian time. And actually, you just need to know the facts that fit into your story. So once I'd started writing my story, I knew that I needed to know about Victorian theatre, I needed to know about Victorian poisons, I needed to see the landscape of Cardiff at that time because it's very different to how it is now. So I looked up Cardiff in Victorian times and I made lots and lots of notes. And then I tried to put those facts and those things that I'd found out, those discoveries, that research I'd done online and by walking around Cardiff as well, with my experience of the theatres, I tried to mix all those things together so that I could create Nancy's world in the most vivid way that I could. However, there may be mistakes in there. So if there are things that don't really seem like they would have existed in Victorian times, I've probably made a mistake. I'm a writer, not a historian. I did my best. Next question. Do you listen to music as you write? And that's from George. Yes, George, I do. I've recently started listening to a very strange bit of music which is played on an instrument called, I think it's the instrument, I'm not sure if it's the instrument actually or the type of music, now I've said that. It's called duduk or duduk, I'm not sure. And it's kind of this sort of meditation music. It's like, ooh, it's very strange and it puts you into strange kind of space in your head. So you're a bit spaced out. But I'm using that at the moment. When I was listening, when I was writing a Victorian story, I listened to Victorian music. When I was writing a ghost story, I listened to some music from some television shows I used to watch when I was young, which were, they were called Children of the Stone and Picture Box was another one. These programmes that I watched in the 70s, and those used to scare me when I was young. And so as soon as I put that music on for those two television shows, it scared me again, and it put me in that like creepy mindset. So yeah, I find that music can really help to put you into the world of the story. So at the moment I'm working on an Elizabethan story, and don't tell anyone else, that's a secret. but I'm listening to lots of Elizabethan music to get into that headspace, to try and imagine what it would be like to be in those castles and palaces and Elizabethan places. I hope that makes sense. Do you like to write a chapter in one go, or do you take lots of breaks? And that's from Alfie. It varies, Alfie. Sometimes I can write a chapter in one go and it just flows beautifully and it takes no time at all. And sometimes I write 2 lines and think, oh, I've got nothing else in my head. What I will do then, and I can see this refers to somebody else's question as well, how do you overcome writer's block, Ruby C? The way that I work if my writing isn't flowing is I used to just sit there and try and make myself write, and I've realised that just does not work at all. So what I do is I go for a walk. I go outside somewhere, doesn't matter where, just walk around, try and forget about my story. And as soon as you try to forget about your story and you're walking around, ideas start flooding into your head. So if I'm having a difficult writing day, I'll just go for a walk. So I suggest you try that. That might help you overcome writer's block or write up to a chapter if that's what you're aiming for. What does it mean to be the Children's Laureate for Wales? And that's from Miley. Miley, what it means is that I get to speak to a lot of young people about how important it is to use your voice and your stories and for you to be creative and get those ideas down on paper. And I talk to you about reading, the importance of reading. The more you read, the more words you'll have inside your head to express how you're feeling and to tell your stories and to be clear about what you want from things. Your voice and your stories are very, very powerful. So for me, as Children's Laureate for Wales, I'm encouraging all young people in Wales to get their stories told, written down, read as much as you can so you can make your imagination grow huge and you can get more ideas and you can be the storytellers of today and tomorrow, actually, the authors of today and the future. Yes. What advice would you give to young authors? That's from Joe. Oh, that's a good question, Joe. I would say 2 things are really important. Firstly, using your own voice and your own ideas and telling your own stories, because everybody's got interesting stories to tell. But also, this is a really practical one. Get a notebook and write those ideas down, because I cannot tell you the amount of times I've had ideas for a story and thought, that'll stay in my head. And then 10 minutes later, I'm thinking, what was that brilliant idea for my story? I cannot remember. So get a notebook, write down ideas as soon as you have them. Also, be a detective of life. So keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open for things that nobody else will notice, little unusual things that are going on, and make a note of those for your stories, because you never know what might come in handy. So yeah, use your voice, read lots. Read lots is obvious really, isn't it? Read as much as you can, everything. Any kind of stories, doesn't matter what kind of stories they are. Yeah, and get a notebook. I love a notebook. What advice would you give to the pupils of Wales, Jen? Oh, that kind of crosses over with what I said already, Jen. My advice is to read as many books and educate yourself as much as you possibly can. Have conversations with people. Listen to different people's opinions, but keep your own opinion. And make sure your voice is heard, because you're a really powerful person and your voice is very, very important and valued. And my advice would be, yeah, just follow your dreams, follow your heart, grow your imagination and use your own voice. Finally, we would love to know what the term New Horizons means to you. Ooh, what does it mean to me? New Horizons. I guess to me, New Horizons means new chances and excitement and adventure and possibly pushing yourself out there to experience new things and have fun. What does it mean to you? It was lovely to meet you all, and I hope you enjoy reading and have a fantastic festival, and I hope to see you all in real life one day soon. Lovely to meet you. Bye.